What's going on, everybody? It's your boy C-Zar, and we are talking about Bitcoin today. It is the 15th day of November, and the purpose of this video is to discuss the relationship that Bitcoin has with its 50-week moving average. I'm sure everybody's been watching this like a hawk for the past couple of weeks now. You're very well aware, as I am, as everybody is, that we are quite a ways below the 50-week moving average now. Where we are here, with 1 day and 11 hours left in this week, we are about 7.5% away from this weekly moving average. I've actually taken it upon myself, I've taken the liberty to go through, right? So this is what it would take between now and the end of this week is a 7.5% move, right? That's what it would take, is a 7.5% move from the base of where Saturday opened. That would actually be a 9% move, okay? 9% move overall. I've taken the liberty and gone through every single weekend, every single one that we've had this bull market. Literally, I counted through 151 different weekends. And just hear me out, okay? I have a purpose. I have a purpose for this. 151 different weekends. We have only had two where from the open of Saturday, out of 151 weekends that we've had this cycle since January, December 2022, January 2023, since this time here, we've only had two weekends where from the open on Saturday to the close on Sunday, we saw something that was greater than a 9% growth overall, right? Here, this one was close. This one was close, open to high. I mean, there was a 7.3% growth there, but we didn't get it, no cigar. What I'm trying to do here, and in case it's not clear, look, here was one. From an opening point on Saturday to the high point on Sunday, we did, and the closing price, I guess, is the most important. We closed 10% up right there. And then here's the second one, all the way over here earlier this year. And I guess I shouldn't measure the top price, but the closing price, right? Because that's what it'll take, is that on Sunday, between today and tomorrow, Sunday, we close 9% higher, right? Because that right there, that level, that's where our weekly moving average is, our 50-week moving average. So I went through and I counted 151 weekends we've had. This is the 151st week that we've had this bull market, okay? As far as weekends go. And we've only seen it twice, two times, once here, twice here, where we actually had enough oomph to send us to the price that we need to go to, the amount of growth that we need in this amount of time, this very finite Saturday to Sunday window that we have, okay? So 2 out of 151, I don't know if anybody can do math, but that's basically like a 1.5% chance, or maybe it's like 1.3% chance. I don't know. Let's do it real quick. Let's just do it real quick. Here we are. Calculator. 2 divided by 151. I don't know. I'm just too lazy to do the math right now. Why won't you work? What's going on? There we go. Come on. 2 divided by 151 equals about 1.3%, 1.32%. So in this very simplistic outlook, we have a 1.3% chance of closing above the 50-week moving average this week, okay? And I'm addressing this right off the bat, not to concern anybody, but to just basically address that at this point, 1 day and 11 hours left in this week, we should all accept that it's a very realistic probability that we will be closing below the 50-week moving average. Everybody right now, every single bull out there, and the bears, they're all hoping and praying that Bitcoin closes below or above the 50-week. It's like this very important level, and it is pretty important. I mean, throughout this whole cycle, it's been a very important level, but I want to show you guys an example too, that let's accept that we are in fact closing below the 50-week moving average. I want to show you an example that we had last cycle where Bitcoin did close below the 50-week moving average, and it was not the end of the bull market. Everybody's acting like this is such a big deal. And the thing is, you know, typically it is a big deal, but there's always exceptions, and there's always context, I think, that's key. If you're looking at the 50-week moving average and you're saying, as long as we don't close below there, we're fine, but oh my God, if we close here, then we're going to zero. It's not that simple. There's so many other things going on, right? And I think any technical analyst, any person who's been doing this for a little while, they would all tell you the same thing, that one indicator is not enough to get super bullish or super bearish on anything. One indicator alone is not. Take, for example, the 50-week moving average. You want to say that closing here means we're in a bear market. Okay, maybe. So then if we close back above it, are we back in a bull market? Is that what that means, right? Because if it's that cut and dry, does that mean if we close below it once, now if we close back above it, we're not in a bull market? It's just not, now it's disregarded, it's disrespected? No. So all we have to do is close back above it. Well, here's the deal. Crypto Fear and Greed Index right now, it says it's at a 22. I haven't refreshed it, at least on Coin Market Cap. The Crypto Fear and Greed Index, if it will load, is at a 16. This is the lowest reading that we've had on the Crypto Fear and Greed Index since our lows on April 7th here, which was at a 17, 15, right? This little low point here. And that was the low of the market. Now let's imagine here that both of these indicators are telling us the truth. One, that closing below the 50-week moving average means that we're in a bear market. By the way, in case it's not obvious by now, I don't believe we're in a bear market. Even if we close here, I don't think that we're going to be in a bear market. I'm going to build out a case for that as this video goes on, okay? But let's imagine we do close here and we're in a bear market. And let's imagine here we are very fearful. We're oversold as far as the fear and greed index goes, and we're due for a bounce. Okay, so let's assume both of them are true. Well, that would mean then, even if we're in a bear market, Bitcoin's likely going to recover. The last time that we saw fear and greed this low on our alternative.me, which this is the oldest fear and greed index that we have for crypto. It's a different fear and greed index than the coin market cap one. This one's at 10. This one's at 16. I like the CMC one a little bit better personally. But the last time we were here, it was April 7th. Bitcoin saw a pump from a low of that week to, let's just say 1 month later. Let's go to May 7th, okay, to a high of that following week, a 40% pump. So you saw a 40% pump in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, okay? So let's imagine Bitcoin from the low here pumps 40% in 5 weeks. Well, that takes us to new all-time highs. So do you see the confliction there as to why maybe we're not in a bear market if we close below the 50? Do you guys see it? Because we've also got this just single indicator. It's actually two indicators, but based off the same kind of context, right? The last time this was an extreme fear as well, that was back here in April 7th as well, right? That was literally that was back here, right here, April. It won't take me. It won't let me get it, but I promise you that was this right here. Okay, it was the same thing back here. Both of these indicators, which have similar metrics yet different metrics, they both the last time that we saw these similar readings, we saw a 41% pump in 5 weeks. Maybe we don't pump for 5 weeks. Let's just say 1 week. Okay, well we pumped 20% in 1 week, or 15% in 1 week. Okay, so 15% from here still in 1 week, because maybe we're in a bear market. Maybe we don't pump for 5 weeks, which I doubt. But that means then that if we get a 15% pump, that we're going to be back at 108K at some point, back up here. And that means we're going to get back above the 50-week moving average. And again, I ask, if closing below it is such a detriment, if closing below the 50-week moving average is such a detriment, does that mean closing above it saves us? That's my question. Because if it's an end-all be-all one way, why is it not an end-all be-all the other way too? That doesn't make sense. And maybe I'm being too pragmatic. I don't know. Maybe I'm asking the wrong questions. But let's go forward, or let's go backward, I should say, and show you an example of what I'm talking about here, where we did in fact close below the 50-week moving average and still saw new all-time highs without seeing a bear market. Okay, let's go over the last time that we saw that. So nothing this cycle, right? This cycle, the 50-week has held us up very well, but we go through here, and I mean, again, example, we closed above it here for 1 week, 2 weeks in a row, and then we came back down, right? So we can close above it. We can close below it, close back above it, and that doesn't save the day. We've seen that there, which I find kind of odd. Here, we closed below the 50-week. Just barely, but we still closed below the 50-week right there. And then we went to new all-time highs, okay? Was this a signal that we were in a bear market? Maybe. We weren't in a bear market yet, but maybe it was the signal of things to come, but we still did go to new all-time highs, okay? The last time before this, we closed right here below the 50-week moving average, 2 weeks here. And then we came up, okay? So that kind of, you know, being under it, then getting above it, then getting back under it, getting back. We've shown some disrespect here and shown that we can continue to grow. Here, we closed below the 50-week moving average. Closed above it, kind of disrespected it. We did have the COVID crash. A lot of people say, and myself included, say that this crash would not have been as intense if it wasn't for COVID. Might we have instead found support somewhere a little bit higher? Maybe. But this is certainly, I think we can all agree that this is certainly not a bear market, right? This is definitely not a bear market. Yet we closed below the 50-week moving average several times here and even here, and then we went on our massive rally. In fact, what I would like, the dots I'd like to connect right now are that when we are at these same levels of fear, these very same, because back here, this was March of 2020. Let's see. When we were at March of 2020, we were at these exact same levels. Look at this. Right here at a 9. We're at a 10 right now. Same levels of fear. The same closing below a 50-week moving average. It's almost as if this zone, right before we saw our end of cycle spectacular finish, it's almost as if we have the exact same readings now up here, just with a little bit less extremeness. It's a little bit less extreme. It's almost as if we have the same readings here as we did back here. And imagine if you were one of the people that back here thought, oh God, we're in a bear market. It's the end of the cycle. Everybody run for the hills. You might have felt smart for a month or two, but then you would have missed out on everything. Just imagine, right? We have the exact same readings as we did before. Everybody back here is saying we closed below the 50-week. We're in a bear market now. Bitcoin's broken. All the same things. I was there. I remember. I literally remember it. Meanwhile, me and my buddy, one of my really good crypto buddies, we were laughing and we were talking about how we need to buy more. This is a really good opportunity to buy, actually, right? Same kind of concept here. Everybody's fearful. We're going to close below the 50-week. I want you to understand, if you're watching this video because you're trying to have somebody tell you it's not going to happen, it's not that it can't happen. It's that there's a 1.32% chance of it happening based on the parameters of the last 151 weeks of the bull market that we've only seen 2 weeks that have had enough momentum to move to the amount of growth that we need in this allotted time before Sunday closes, right? We have a less than 1.5% chance. Okay, so just accept it. We're likely going to close below the 50-week. That will cause massive capitulation. There's going to be a lot of people who sell based off of that on principle alone. People who know what they're doing, but also people mainly who don't know what they're doing, who are listening to people who know what they're doing, or listening to this idea that if we close below, that's it. I guarantee you, I shouldn't say I guarantee. There's no guarantees, but I guarantee you, man, we close below the 50-week this week. Next week's going to be a green week. Next week or the following week, we're going to be closing above the 50-week again. We're going to be moving back above 110K. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if we went to new all-time highs. But hold on now. Let's do this again. Okay? What did we see from there whenever we closed below the 50-week? Hold on, let me get rid of all these little white lines. There we go. We closed below the 50-week, and from that closing point, we did move down 51% in 1 week. That was very intense. But again, that was the COVID crash. If we use our eyes, maybe we would have dropped instead. Without COVID, we would have dropped like 30% or 12%, somewhere in that range, which is still very intense for Bitcoin. A 12% drop in a week is intense, you guys, let alone 33%. So maybe, and I don't think so, but maybe we have more dropping to go. Maybe this does explain that we have more dropping to go. And if we do, it's completely possible that we go lower. But I don't know if it's enough to say that the end of the bull market's here. That's really all I'm trying to say. We've closed below the 50-week moving average before. We've been in a bear market and closed above it, and that's still, this is an example of exactly what I'm saying here, is that we've been in a bear market before. We closed above the 50-week, and that didn't mean it was the end of the bear market. No, we kept going down. We've closed below the 50-week before, and that didn't mean that was the end of the bull market. No, we kept going up. We kept going up, right? We've seen this happen before. Now, back here in this cycle, and any of the other cycles in the past, it didn't respect this as well, but that's because Bitcoin was also a little bit newer. We didn't interact with the 50 as much back then, right? We look at the S&P 500. The S&P, I put a correlation coefficient on here. This shows how correlated Bitcoin is and isn't to the S&P 500. And if we're looking at it on a weekly time frame, typically we're very correlated. The closer you are to this white line up here, the more correlated you are. The closer you are to this white line down here, the less correlated you are, the more inverse you are. What is correlated? What does inverse mean? It means if this is moving up, Bitcoin's moving up too. If it's moving down, Bitcoin's moving down too. If they're inversely correlated, that means this will move up and Bitcoin moves down, or Bitcoin moves down and this thing moves up, whatever. For most of the time, we've been pretty correlated. We look at this on a monthly time frame. You can see the S&P 500 and Bitcoin are actually very, very correlated for the most part. Not always, but for the most part. Okay, and with the S&P, we closed below the 50 here. That did signal that there was going to be some kind of a drop later. But again, recovery. Was this a bear market? I mean, for some people, maybe from February 2025 to April, is that a bear market? Maybe. I would call that, maybe just a correction. Not a bear market, but It's a correction. We've actually seen it where we close below the 50 and then the next week we come right back up above it. It's almost as if closing below the 50 for the S&P, something that Bitcoin's very correlated to, was actually a bottoming point. And same thing here, right? Same thing back here. Maybe we were in a bear market, right? It's a little bit less respected because of that. We're coming out of the bear market, but okay. We could accept that. You know, here, closing below it did mark it was one of the signals to mark that the bear market had begun, but the bear market already begun by this point a couple months before, right? So it's not the end-all be-all signal, right? Here we are, massive flash crash. That was the COVID crash. Imagine if you sold below the 50, that was the worst time to sell. We got back above it, and then we got back below it. Imagine if you sold there, that was the worst time to sell. We kept going. Right here, right below the 50, as soon as we closed below it, the next week we moved up. As soon as we closed at it, the next week we moved up here, right? These weren't even bear markets. These are just modest corrections. And in fact, it's not that you don't respect the 50. You clearly do. There's so many times where you do respect the 50. It's just we've seen a plethora of moments here where you close right below it or barely below it, and that doesn't give you a bear market. You actually still continue to grow. And the S&P and Bitcoin are different, but again, the main thought here is they're pretty correlated. They are actually very correlated. And I think the S&P will continue to grow. I think Bitcoin will continue to grow, but I hope the essence of this video is sticking with you guys, that first and foremost, we are going to close below the 50 week. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in 1 day and 10 and a half hours at this point, okay? It's going to happen. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the bear market, or the beginning of the bear market, okay? There are a lot more indicators to pay attention to. We haven't even gone over our RSI, right? Again, talking about how one indicator is not enough to go off of. If this is your end-all be-all indicator, it's a pretty weak indicator because we've already shown so many inconsistencies throughout Bitcoin's life, let alone the S&P's life, which Bitcoin is very correlated to, right? We've shown examples where we've done this exact thing and then moved up, not but like 5 weeks later, right? We've seen intense growth. What was I about to say? Beyond this indicator, there's not really much telling us that we're in a bear market, right? Beyond this, there's really not much. But there is a lot telling us that we're in extreme levels of fear, that we're at the same areas that we were last time we bounced. And it's not just the fear and greed index. It's not just these two indicators, which are basically the same thing, just their own variations of it, right? But the weekly RSI as well. The weekly RSI here, if we close here, you guys, or if we pull up a little bit even going into Sunday, we are in the exact same area that we have been every single time that we found support. And again, I do assume that we will probably move up for Sunday's close. We'll probably be up a little bit higher. It won't be down here at the 36, but even if it is, we're at the same level every single time this cycle that we found support and bounced, right? The low points of this RSI at the exact same area we are now was the low points of the price when we were at the exact same levels of fear that we have in the fear and greed index now, right? It was right here. Same thing with this, same thing with this, okay? Both of those other two times where we were fearful like this and like this, these two moments, those were correlated with these two moments here, which were low points right before we started to move up. The stochastics, another indicator, is oversold. And every time we've been oversold, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, we look at it here. Every single time we've been oversold this cycle on the weekly stochastics. We were at a low point. We were at a low point. The low still came in a little bit lower afterwards. We were at a low point. The low came in a little bit lower afterwards. We were at a low point. We were at a low point in the market every single time. Okay? The MACD. The MACD at these levels in the histogram, right? These low levels here in the histogram, and where the oscillators are right here. You see the oscillators, the blue line? The blue line here is directly in line with where we were last time. It's a little bit above here. We're overall trending. We've got higher lows, but it's overall, even the MACD is showing similar signals, similar readings as we've seen in every single low point here. So I get that people are freaking out about the 50-week moving average, but why aren't we addressing every other indicator that suggests that we're at a low point? Why aren't we addressing that we've actually closed below the 50-week moving average before and moved back up? We've actually closed above the 50-week moving average before and we have moved back down. It was not the end of the bear market, right? It's not the end-all be-all that it is. And the fact that every single person on X.com right now is thinking that if we close below the 50-week moving average, that means that it's it. This is the signal. This means we're dead. Just tells me that nobody's paying attention to every other detail, right? You're looking at one little thing. You're looking at one little dent in the hole and saying that that's going to sink the ship. I don't know. Maybe it will. I'm not familiar with maritime anything. Maybe a dent in the hull will sink the ship, but that might not be a good analogy. But all I'm saying is maybe it's not a dent, it's a little scratch. It's like a scratch from a twig. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's a little bit more intense than that. I don't want to underplay it. It's a big deal closing below the 50-week moving average. Clearly it is, because we haven't done it at all this cycle. And I think if there were other things in combination with this, I'd be a little bit more worried. But the other things that we have in combination with this are more telling me, and thus I'm telling you, that we're at a low point, not at a going lower point. Okay? Not only that, but man, the longs to shorts. Look at how many shorts there are versus longs. We've got 2 billion in longs, you guys. That is very low. We got almost 15.5 billion in shorts. That's very high. The government just reopened. Liquidity is coming back in the markets. The market is irrational and fearful. We're going to close below the 50-week moving average. And the bull market is still on. I wonder how many people are saying that. Anyways, hit the like button, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.